Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Zevachim daf Nun Daled, Zevachim 54. We're going to start on the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Beis, and the Gemara tells us of 5 lines from the bottom that Amar on 53b, Amar Rabbi Levi Bar Chama, Amar Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina, Ritzua Haisa Yotze Mechalko Shel Yehuda. That we know that the Temple Mount was shared between Judah and Benjamin had the parts of the sanctuary itself and the western part of the courtyard, and Judah had most of the place of the Azara where the people were allowed to stand. So, but there was a strip that went out from the portion of Judah, and it went into the portion of Benjamin. Binyamin Tzaddik, and why is he called Binyamin Tzaddik? That's itself something to study. But Binyamin, the righteous one, was Mitzdara Abakol Yom Wenotla, that he was desiring so much. He was in anguish every day to be able to get that last portion. And it's not that he wanted to take away from Judah, but he wanted to fulfill the mitzvah properly. As it states on top of 54, Echol faithful of Kol Yom. But the whole day he was in distress about this, like chafifa, like anguish. Rashi says. Therefore, Binyamin Tzaddik merited and became the host for God. And that's why the Aron Kodesh was held in the territory of Benjamin, as it says, between his shoulders he will dwell. And we see from here that Binyamin merited to have the Aron Kodesh in his territory. Why did Binyamin have this merit? Because he desired so much for the mitzvah. Also in our parasha, we see in Parashas Vayera that Avram Avinu desired to do the mitzvah so much that Hashem Yisparach made the angels appear to him, which gave him ultimately the good tidings that Yitzchak would be born. So now the Gemara says, is it really the case? The Gemara had said that there was no yesod, that there was no base for the altar in the southeastern corner, that the full north and the full west had bases, and there was a base in the jutting out from the southwest and the northeast corner, but the southeastern corner had nothing. So the Gemara says, let's challenge this idea. Mesa, is it really the case there is no base in the southeastern corner? Boker Tov Jeff. We're 3 lines from the top on 54a. But doesn't it state about the Olas Ha'of? Well, the Olas Ha'of is the bird offering for an Olah. Here's a Gemara right here. There's a lot of them here. The Gemara says, Ketzad Haisanasis. How would the Kohen bring this Olas Ha'of? He would be standing above the southeastern corner on Haya Moikas Rosha Mimul Orpa. He would basically kill the bird by sticking his finger through the back of the neck, Umavdil, and he would separate the simanim. Rashi says he would cut both of the simanim. Normally, a bird only requires 1 siman, but in this case, he requires 2. Umamatze dama, and then he would squeeze the blood al kira mizbeach, on the wall of the altar. And Rashi reminds us that later on we're going to say that this had to be done on the southeast. And so therefore the question is, if there's no yesod, if there's no base there, Rashi says when he killed the animal in the airspace, the blood was going to fall to the ground, and it's not falling on the base. And so therefore, how is it possible that the blood is not falling on the altar? So that's what Rashi says. So that's the question. He's doing the bird over the southeastern part. Why wouldn't they tell him to do it over a different part of the Mizbeach where there is a Yesod? The Gemara says, if there's no Yesod, it's just going into the airspace, and it's not fulfilling the mitzvah properly. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Amar Kachis no, this is what the rabbi stipulated. Avira de Binyamin Karka de Yehuda. The airspace is Benjamin, and the land is Judah. So the way Rashi understands this is a dispute here between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Rashi says that we have to assume that since the airspace was Judah, it was Benjamin, and the land was Judah, What happened was when the blood came down, there was a protrusion that wasn't mentioned in the Gemara anywhere. And Rashi assumes he's in Machadesh. He says there was a blita katana, keneged oso akaran. There's a little protrusion coming out, and that's where the blood fell. Rabbeinu Tam does not like this answer because it doesn't. It never actually says that, and so therefore, the Tosfos brings the position of Rabbeinu Chaim, who says they give different answers here, but basically the question. So the concept was that the Gemara is how could the Malika, that Rabbeinu Tam understands the question, how could the Malika be done over the airspace of Judah? And so therefore it's like you're doing the service outside of the temple. And so therefore the Gemara is saying no, that even though the land was Judah, the airspace was Benjamin, and so therefore it's totally okay. So that's there's a lot of discussion about this this piece because it's opaque. So now the Gemara says, what does it mean when we say we have no yisod? What does it mean when it says that the south, that basically the southern, and the eastern parts of the altar have no base? What does that mean? So Rav Amar Binyan, Rav says that literally they don't have the base there. Levi says B'damim. No, Levi says it just means that there was actually a structure there or something physical there, but if you applied the blood there, it wouldn't work. Rav Metargim, and we have the words that say, it says in the Torah, it says the words in the Torah, it says Binyamin Ze'ev Yitrach. Binyamin is like a tearing wolf. So Rav would translate that as Ba'achsante Yasvana de Midbacha, meaning to say in the portion of Benjamin will build the altar. And so therefore, since the altar, those parts are not in the portion of Benjamin, therefore there was no base. Whereas Levi Mitargim Ba'achsante Yispani Mikdasha, in the portion of Benjamin, the altar will be built. What does that mean? Yispani Mikdash, and not the Mizbeach, but the Mikdash, Makam Mekudash Ladamim, a place that is open for blood. And so it means say the place, Benjamin's place, was the only place where you could pour the blood. So the Gemara says, Tashma, we're going to try and prove who's correct, Levi or Rav. Levi says that there was a structure there, and Rav says there was no structure. Tashma, hayesod hayamahalech al pnei kol hatzafon, al pnei kol hamarav. So in the description of this, we're going to learn in the Mishnah Midos. The Mishnah Midos tells us that there was a yesod that went all across the north and all across the west. V'ochal b'darom ama achas u'b'mizrach ama achas. And it says, and it consumed or it ate one ama in the east and one amma in the south. This seems to be exactly like Rav's position, that there was no structure in the other parts of the south and the east. So the Gemara says, no, what does it mean when it's ochel? My ochel nami b'damim? It means that that's where the blood could be thrown, not that there was no structure. Gemara again attempts to prove, but this time the Gemara is trying to prove like Levi, who says that there was a structure built there, and again from a Mishnah in Midos. And what's the Mishnah? It says the altar was 32 amos by 32 amos, 32 amos long, 30 amos wide. And so we see from here that the whole thing was all the way around. So it had a yesod all the way around. So this is a proof like Levi, not like Rav. And where it says, no, no, it just means two sides, just the north and the west had 32 by 32, but it doesn't mean that all the way around. Tashma, so Gemara again attempts to prove it, but this is actually not from a Mishnah or Brisa. This is from the Gemara later on. It says the discussion is that it says that the problem is it says that the Mizbeach was 32 amos and the ramp of the Mizbeach was 32 amos, and together was 62 amos, which is a problem because it should be 64. So how did it happen that it was 62? Nimtza poreach amal yesod va'ama al soviv. So the ramp, which went up the southern part, on the southern side of the altar, was overlapping one yesod one amma of the Yesod and one amma of the Sovev, which implies that there was a Yesod there, and so therefore there's a proof like Levi. Gemara said, no, Ema Kineged Amma Yesod, the Al Amma Sovev. No, it means just where the amma of the Yesod would have been, but it wasn't there because it was on the southern side. The Gemara doesn't determine who's correct, Rav or Levi. Most of the drawings we have of the Mizbeach all are like Rav and not like Levi. So I guess that's the assumption of the commentaries that we pass like Rav. Tashma. So the Gemara now says, Tashma, the Tani Levi, Kate said bonus Mizbeach. Again, we're trying to prove like Levi that it was all the way around. Because it says, how was the altar built? Mevi and Milabin, they bring like a Milabin, which is like a press or a mold, which was 32 by 32. The Gova Aman, it was 1 Amma high. Mevi Chaluke Avanim Mefulamos. They would bring these smooth stones, like that were from the ocean, that they were all smooth with no nicks in them. That would disqualify them, being Gedolos Katanas, different shapes. Maybe Sid, Vikunya, Vezefet, Umamacha, Veshofech. And they would basically bring some like mixture that would harden them together, and that's how they would build the base of the altar. Like a concrete mix. Makom Yesod, that was the base. The choser maybe malab, and then they brought another mold, Shloshim Amma, which went on top of it, just a little bit smaller, which was 30 Amma by 30 Amma, the Gova Chamesh Amos, and this one was 5 Amos high. Maybe Chaluke Avanim, and then they would bring these smooth stones. Choser or maybe malab, and went through the same process. And then they brought another press, which was Chavchas al Chavchas Amos, which is 28 by 28, Begova Sholosh Amos. Basically, it was 3 tiers to the altar: the Yesod, then the main base, and then the top base. And then on top of that, they had another one, and that the top base so far was the Makom HaMaracha. That's where the fire went. And then they had the 4th level, the Choser maybe Malabin to Amo Amo, which is 1 Amo by 1 Amo, maybe Chaluke Avanim Fulamas, and they brought these wet stones, different sizes, Bengadolos, Bengatana, so maybe Zephes Vakunya, and then they brought this concrete mix, whatever material it was, and Malch Veshofech, Vazel Karen. That's the 4th level, was where they made the horns. So we see from here very clearly that they had a base 32 by 32 all the way around. And this proves like Levi, because if you have the mold, what are you going to do? And if you, what? No, I assume they removed the mold, but it doesn't say it specifically. No, the mold, the inside of the mold was 32 by 32. And if you want to say the guy is Avanim, the guy is that afterwards they cut it away and they chiseled it down, so they got rid of the southern part and the eastern part. No, that wouldn't work, because Avanim Shlemos Ksiv, we need complete stones. And so and you can't have chiseled away stones. So this proves like Levi. Gemara says, no, the Machas Midei Metute V'Shakal. No, they had a space filler to prevent the concrete from filling in, like they had some wood, a common building technique. Because if you're not going to say that they had that, Adam Rav Kahana, Avanim Shal Karanos, we know that Rav Kahana said that these stones for the horns were Kalulas Hayu, that they were hollow. So the horns also had to be complete stones. Ella the machis midei mitute v'shakel. So they had some material that was preventing the concrete from going there. Hachinami the machis midei mitute v'shakel. By the way, so why didn't they use the shamir? Tosfos asks. And we know that there was the shamir during this time. Tosfos says the shamir was this special worm which would be able to chisel down the stones without chiseling them. It would be able to reduce them. So why didn't they use that? So Tosfos discusses that question. And Tosfos says we know that it was in the second temple. Okay, one of the proofs for Tosfos is from Dalman ben Nesina, where they went to get the stones for the Or V'Tumim, and they had to be engraved through using the shamir. Okay, Darash Rava. So now the Gemara says, let's discuss that which we said, that the altar was built in the border between Benjamin and Judah. Darash Rava expounds, Ma'idach Sev, what do we do from the pasuk? Vayech David u'Shmuel vayeshvu b'nuyot b'Ramah. Benayot Birama, which is actually not an actual verse. It's a combination of different verses. And the actual pasuk is that the David Barak, David ran away, Vayimelech escaped, and he came to Shmuel the Ramata, and he told him everything that had happened that Shaul had done to him. And he and Shmuel went, Vayeshvu Benayot. And then they dwelt in Benayot. And then it was told to Shaul that, behold, David went to Nayot Birama. So basically, so we see from here that this whole story, and this is relevant, this whole story is taking place with David running away from Shaul, and he went to Shmuel in Nayot, and then later on it says he went to Ramah. There is no place Nayot Ramah, but the Gemara puts them together. So the Gemara says, "V'chima inyon Nayot etzel Ramah." Why is Nayot listed next to Ramah? That's not our pasuk, but the Gemara assumes that the proximity. Ella, so what it means is Shayu Yoshvin b'Ramah, that Shmuel and David were sitting together in Ramah, v'oskin b'noyo shalolam, and they were trying to figure out where the Beis Hamikdash should be built, the building of the world. Amri, they said, Ksiv, v'kamta v'alizal makom. You should go up to the place. This teaches us that the temple is higher than every place in Israel. The Eretz Israel, Gavoa Mikol Aratzos, and Israel is higher than all the other lands. But Shmuel and David didn't know where the place was. They didn't know where it was. Isu Sefer Yoshua. So what farm did they have? The library was smaller back then. They brought out the book of Joshua. The Kuluksev, by all the division of the territories, it says the words in the pasuk are v'yarad hagvul, v'tar hagvul. But by Sheva Benjamin, meaning say the territory went down or continued. But by Benjamin it says v'aloksev. V'yarad loksev. By Benjamin it says it went up. So therefore they assume that Benjamin was where the temple was. Amr Shmamina Hachul Makom. They said this is the place. Savar Lemimnaya Be'in Eitam. They said let's build it at the highest point in Benjamin, which was not the Temple Mount, but a place called Ein Eitam. So they thought to build it there. Demadli, because they said let's build it there because that is the highest place. Amri Nisasi Be Khalil. They said, no, let's actually lower it a little bit because it says the ark should dwell between the shoulders. The Ibay is saying, or alternatively, the reason why they didn't put it at Ein Eitam, but they put it on the Temple Mount was because, hold on one second. The reason why they put on the Temple Mount was because we have a tradition, Gemiri de Sanhedrin Bechalko de Yehuda, that Sanhedrin is in the portion of Judah, V'Shchina Bechalko de Binyamin, and the divine presence is in the portion of Benjamin. V'i Madlinan way, and if we're going to put the Beis Hamikdash in Eitam, it won't be next to Benjamin. It won't be next to Judah, and so we'd have a problem. And so Mispalik will be too far away. Mutav denisasebe pirta. We'll lower it down a little bit. So we see from here that this, to me, is very extremely powerful because David HaMelech was running away from Shaul at the time, and he said, "Yes, but the Beis Hamikdash has to go in Benjamin's territory." And this is in the midst of a tremendous civil war. And also Shaul HaMelech was about to kill the city of all the Kohanim of Nov. But yet David said, Binyamin is where the Beis Hamikdash has to go. And at the same time, Benjamin had to lower himself, so he was right next to the territory of Judah. They had to be next to each other. Gemara says, and about this matter that David figured out where to build the Beis Hamikdash, David. About this, Doeg the Edomite was very jealous of David because it states, Kedosev ki kinas beischa achaltani, achalatni. The jealousy of your house was what consumed me. Meaning to say, David Melech said, Doeg was so jealous of me because I understood where to build the base of Mikdash. And also it says, Zachor Hashem with David as kol uno so, Asher Nishba Hashem. God remembered for David all the struggles that he did. And he said, Im avo ba'ol beisim etein shenat le'nayla fafayt numad em tzamakom Hashem. That David said, I'm not going to sleep at all. I'm not going to do any of my needs until I'm able to find a place for God. Meaning David was relentless. And also it states, Hine shemanua be'efrasa mitzanua b'stei ya'ir. Behold, we heard about it from Ephrasa, and we found it in the Stei Ya'ar. Ephrasa means De Yoshua, meaning to say that in Joshua, we discovered, in the book of Joshua, we discovered where to build a temple. Mitzanua b'Stei Ya'ar, that refers to Benjamin. They'll say Benjamin Ze'ev Yitraf. And he's compared to the animals of the forest, and we say it's going to be in the portion of Benjamin. Obviously, a very deep dive. There's a lot to talk about with the Temple Mount, where it dwells. Not at the absolute highest point, a place of unity, a place of place that's shared between the two powers of Benjamin and Judah. So now up to the next Mishnah, says the Mishnah, Zivchei Shalmei Tzibor, the communal shlomim. There's actually only one, which are the two sheep on Shavuos. The ashamos and the ashamos, we're going to list out the ashams. We've said what an ola is, we said what a chatas is, and now we're going to describe the different types of an asham. And elohein ashamos, these animals, the zivchei shalmei tzibor, the communal shlomim of Shavuos, and the ashamos, they're also called kadshe kadashim. What are the ashamos? Asham gezelos. This is if a person has money that he has from somebody else, and he denies that money, and afterwards he admits that he denied the money. He has to bring a karban asham plus pay him back. He has to bring a karban asham plus he has to pay back to the owner the principal amount plus 1/5. That's called an asham gezela. An asham meila, which is if a person benefits from the temple, he has to pay back to the temple the principal that he benefited plus 1/5. In addition to that, he has to bring a karban asham. Okay. Then we have the next case, which is asham shifcha charufa. This is the asham for shifcha charufa. Here Rashi says that this refers to somebody who lies with a shifcha Cananis, a Canaanite slave, who was designated. They don't have kedushin, so they don't have formal marriage, but she was designated for an eved ivri, for a Hebrew slave. Another man is adulterous with her, so he has to bring a karban for that. That's the opinion that Rashi cites. It's actually only according to the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael in Tractate Gittin, but according to Rabbi Akiva, the asham shifcha charufa is brought for a man who lies with a woman who is half still a slave and half free, and she was designated for an eved ivri. So that's the case that Rabbi Akiva says. Anyway, that if a person is with this woman, he has to bring a karban asham. He has to bring this karban asham. Then we have the next case, which is the asham nazir, that a person who was a Nazirite who became tamei from a dead body during his nazirus, he accidentally became tamei. He has to bring the asham nazir, and then if he became tamei intentionally, accidentally, or even ba'onis, even without any guilt whatsoever. And asham mitzora, this is a person who had tzaras, who became healed from his tzaras. So what's an asham taloi? This is a karban if a person is not sure if he violated a sin, which if he had done it intentionally, he would get kares. He's not sure if he violated that sin, then he has to bring the karban asham taloi. So now, what are some of the halachos of this asham tahoid? Shchitasa b'tzafon. It's slaughtered in the north. Kibul daman b'klisharis b'tzafon. He receives the blood in the utensil in the north. V'daman talon shtei matana sheina. But like the olah, he requires two applications, which are four. We saw yesterday the two different ways that can happen. It's also inside the curtains. By the male kohanim b'chol machal, whichever way wants to cook it, liyom v'layla ad chatzos, for that day and night up until chatzos. We'll stop the recording, but we could go on a little bit because we have a few extra minutes. So the Gemara says the following question, because now we're up to the daf for Shabbos.